disseminating anti-Australia and launder it through Afghanistan, launder it through Iraq, launder it through Somalia, launder it through Yemen, launder it through Pakistan, and launch that money in people's hands.
It's all been funded and arranged by this same small group of people who own most of the central banks and most of the assets in the world. They learned long ago that through war and conflict they can seize more control of the world's assets.
After World War II, democracies got together and said, never again. They created a simple document setting out the basic rights we all need to live a dignified life.
Human rights are not privileges, and they cannot be granted or revoked.
Welcome to the 260th Julian Assange Sydney Town Hall gathering.
Thank you.
What does the Australian government's interest in countering misinformation and disinformation bill reveal? Well, if we pay attention to what Julian Assange has been saying, we can realise that censorship reveals fear. We can therefore realise that the Countering Misinformation and Disinformation Bill likewise reveals fear. It is simply a way for governments and those who control governments to censor information on the internet. The parasite class, the bunch who have the power to undemocratically control what our government says and does, wants to censor us because it fears us all realising how the world really works. The Countering Misinformation and Disinformation Bill has been designed to protect the parasite class because its power depends on our ignorance. Ignorance of how the world really works allows people to believe what they are told and make them more willing to comply with the demands of those perceived to have greater authority. If we learn enough to question corrupt governments, they lose their authority, and the parasite class loses its ability to exert control. With knowledge, we move towards what the parasite class fears most: world peace, equality of justice and freedom for all. If we all keep learning the truth, keep spreading the truth, and keep working to vindicate and pardon Julian Assange, more people will inevitably realise their own authority, and the parasite class will be unable to exercise control. If our governments genuinely want to reduce the amount of harm that misinformation and disinformation may cause, we should be able to see our governments working to facilitate free speech in the public interest. It would also not be prosecuting whistleblowers who have revealed the truth about government wrongdoing. It would be empowering people by promoting the work of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. We only have to look at our recent history to find out some very important and relevant truth. The Iraq War was not started by ordinary people. The Iraq War was started by governments and the mainstream media spreading misinformation and disinformation. If the government was serious about preventing harm caused through misinformation and disinformation, it would not have made its own claims or those of the mainstream media exempt from censorship under the Countering Misinformation and Disinformation Bill that is before government right now. In life, it is essential that we learn to never blindly trust governments or the media. The overwhelming majority of people want to live in peace in a world where justice prevails and all decent people are free. Ordinary people don't typically spend the time fabricating and spreading misinformation and disinformation to bring about wars, lack of justice, and loss of freedom. We cannot blindly trust governments and mainstream media because history shows us that great harm befalls those who do. The best defence against government and media misinformation and disinformation is free speech. Clearly, the parasite class is afraid, and it is good that it is afraid. The attempt to have the Countering Misinformation and Disinformation Bill passed in its current form is a sign that the parasite class is concerned that more people will discover their own authority and be empowered to use free speech to bring about peace, justice, and freedom. A better world beckons. The Assange movement continues. Free, free, free the truth. Free, free, free the truth. Free, free, free the truth. Thank you. A lot of people that I associate with have a bit of a pessimistic view of the shit fuckery that's going on in the world, if you'll excuse my French. I have a quote here from Julian Assange from 11 years ago, after he'd been in the Ecuadorian embassy for 1 year. He came out with this statement. Edward Snowden is one of us. Manning is one of us. They are young, technically minded people from the generation that Barack Obama betrayed. They are the generation that grew up on the internet and were shaped by it. The US government is always going to need intelligence analysts and systems administrators, and they are going to have to hire them from this generation and the ones that follow it. One day, their generation will run the NSA, the CIA, and the FBI. This isn't a phenomenon that is going away. It is inevitable. And by trying to crush these young whistleblowers with espionage charges, the US government is taking on a generation. And that is a battle it is going to lose. End of quote. Julian Assange, 22nd of June 2013. after 1 year in the Ecuadorian embassy. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Seeing as though this is now a free speech zone, everyone's welcome to come up and say a few words about what they think is good, what they think is bad, what we can do is better, because we really need a forum of the people. Because the intelligence of all the people is far greater than the intelligence of a number of people in Canberra. I personally would like to declare I'm not anti-government, I'm not anti-Australian, I'm not anti the military, I'm not anti, we need the intelligence services. This is just my personal view. I love Australia, it's the best country in the world because our forebears have done a lot of things right. And the existing government is doing a lot of things right, just as the last government did a lot of things right. But the reason I'm here, and I think all of us are here, is they're doing some things wrong. We have been going through a period where, in my opinion, public officials have been committing the most horrendous crimes. Public officials have been performing crimes against humanity, which are crimes against every one of us. And I personally am sick to death of public officials committing crimes with impunity. How they never get investigated and charged and prosecuted is beyond me. Because these crimes are so much more important than the crimes of some kid stealing a chocolate bar from Woolworths that does get prosecuted. It's time we all wake up. And I also wanted to say one other thing. So we need to fix things, you know, and we don't want to break down any of the system. We've got a great system. We've got a great country. I just wanted to say one more thing. These misinformation laws are the most dangerous legislation that's ever been put before the Australian Parliament. They're even worse than the anti-terror laws where the government can come and pick up anybody in the middle of the night and disappear them. Because these laws are effectively gradually creating a situation which they created in the Bolshevik Revolution, every dictatorship in history, where people that criticize the government can be effectively made a criminal or break a law and be pursued by the system with lawyers. This is a situation with Mary Kostakidis. She's now entangled in legal process which could take 10 years, maybe longer, which is incredibly slow, could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, could bankrupt her. This is a way of frightening people from coming out and saying what really needs to be said. How can we make the country better without free speech? Every dictatorship in the world has begun by outlawing and criminalising speech. Incredibly dangerous laws, and every Australian should be aware of them. If we don't have free speech, we are just not living in a free country. Did you get that? If we don't have free speech, we are not living in a free country. And these people in Canberra that would seek to take away free speech and freedom of expression, initially only on the internet, but I mean, it's a situation where anything you might say just gets cancelled and you don't have any real recourse. Because the government's created the conditions that the internet providers can use as an excuse for cancelling people with impunity. You know, this is so incredibly important. And surprisingly, unsurprisingly, it hasn't been vented in the mainstream media. So I think this is incredibly important. We support our government, we support our military, we support our intelligence services, but we want a fair crack of the whip when it comes to sensible justice. We have to get the justice system back in order, and we have to get the bureaucracy accountable when they do wrong things, and they have to be prosecuted. No more of this unwritten law where if you're a public official you can never face consequences of committing crimes. So, one other thing I'd like to say. If the media aids and abets misinformation, false and misleading information, which leads to harms being done, like wars and whatever, they should be prosecuted. They have effectively committed a crime, a fraud on the people, made money out of it too, by the way. The media is worse than the government because they basically make people believe that we're getting involved in foreign wars and foreign interventions and giving foreign countries money for weapons and for good purposes. They're only telling one side of the story. Very often they lie by omission. And people are not experienced enough to think what they're not telling us. And if they keep repeating these lies, it's exactly what the Nazis did. Joseph Goebbels said this very clearly. If you tell them a lie enough, they'll believe it. If you tell them a big enough lie, they'll believe it. So we have to question everything the government does. And as one last thing I have to say is, why is the government exempt from these misinformation rules? So why can the government lie with impunity and the people can't tell the truth without being cancelled? That ought to make you think about things. Anyway, we're here on Friday evenings to stand up for free speech, human rights, freedom of movement, freedom of medical consent, informed medical consent, all of the freedoms that our forebears allegedly died for. We're here to make sure the government honours them. And also, we're here hoping that the outgoing President, Joseph Biden in America, will pardon Julian Assange. If he doesn't, I'm almost certain that Donald Trump will. Just a question of how long it's going to take. But anyway, please come and join us on Friday. And tell all your family and friends, if we don't have free speech, we are not in a free country. And this misinformation bill should be kicked to the curb. It's got to be tossed out. And I tell you what, we better remember it, because come the next elections, it's bye-bye Anthony Albanese and bye-bye all your cohort of people that are betraying us.
We are all Assange.